Hey everyone, I'm Anna. Thanks for tuning in to DidIWatchThat.com's continuing coverage of Sundance 2021. Rebel Hearts is a documentary feature premiering at the fest this year, and I'm joined with its director, Pedro, producer Shawnee Smith, as well as the subjects themselves, Lenore Navarro Dowling, Rosa Manriquez, and Ruth Ann Murray.
Do you know why your community is being investigated?
The cardinal decided on a new method of bringing correction into the community, and that was by sending a group of priests to interrogate every sister about what she thought of the way the community was going.
Don't you think it will take too much time to fix your hair if you were to change your habit? Is the rule of silence being kept? Where will all of this experimentation lead your community?
Each of us were interviewed several times by different representatives.
Do you remember any of the questions?
I prefer not to go into the details because they're really rather embarrassing.
Do you think the sister's sex life is affected by reading novels? Do you know how pornographic Ulysses is? Do you want to look like a floozy on Hollywood Boulevard?
And then they relayed the message back to the cardinal that our community was moving too fast and that we were very much determined on our progression.
How are you guys doing today?
Fine.
Great.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Pedro, I know you're not a stranger to Sundance, but what is it like to be here this year with this film that's really important right now, as well as here in a different sense, virtually instead of in person?
Yeah, that's a jam-packed question, and it's an extraordinary honor. It really is, and I'm so thrilled that the world will begin to get to know the extraordinary story of the Immaculate Heart sisters and the Immaculate Heart community. It is something that the amazing Shawnee has been working on documenting for over 20 years. Shawnee began interviewing and documenting these women over 20 years ago, and I also fell in love with them immediately when I saw Shawnee's interviews and began documenting myself about 5 years ago. And it's been a real labor of love for everyone. And their journey, I think, even though the film was set in the 1960s, this great awakening and the story of so much about change, I think, is really about where we are now. In the 1960s, they were very much part of the movements of the time and allies in the civil rights and the anti-war movements. And I think nowadays we're also having a moment of a great awakening. And I think this story really speaks to the moment we find ourselves in. And so it is an extraordinary honor and pleasure to be able to bring this out into the world.
Beautifully said. No, I agree. I watched it, and so much of it transcends the, time that it actually took place, and it's so relevant now. Yeah, Shawnee, I was going to ask you that you spent over 20 years researching this, collecting interviews for this project. Like, how did you go about tackling a task like that? And when did you and Pedro team up with this project? Was it from the beginning, or was it like later in the deal?
I started 20 years ago. I don't think even Pedro was born then.
You were too kind.
I was waiting for him to be born. Anyway, yeah, I started 20 years ago. When I heard the story, it was like, it's such a phenomenal story of these courageous women who were early feminists and worked for social justice. I was so inspired by them that I knew it was a story that had to be told, and that could actually be a catalyst for change for the new generation. Now, the new generation I thought was 20 years ago, but as the time went on, each year seemed like it was a little bit more timely, and now we're seeing that it's almost parallel with what's going on today. So it seems like this a perfect time to launch it. I mean, every year I thought it would be a perfect time, but when I met Pedro a few years ago, three years ago, Pedro.
5 years, 2015, October of
Yeah, time
2015.
flies.
It's almost 6 years. Oh my God.
Yeah, I had worked with a lot of different filmmakers, and I had this amazing footage, but I really couldn't find someone who I felt could really help capture the real essence of these women. And also, we always wanted to use Karita Kent's art as kind of a character to punctuate the dramatic climax of the film, and also all of the events that went on. So when I met Pedro, it was kind of like a match as far as we both had the same kind of sensibilities artistically. And I was ready to turn my baby over to him to do his magic with the story. So that's how that all came to pass.
Awesome. That's crazy. And Pedro, there's a quote in the documentary from Monsignor Francis Weber, and he says, just simply one thing that people hate is change. And change seems to be like the umbrella theme over this project, as well as your previous work. So did you go into film itself knowing that you wanted to tell human stories of change, or did that come with experience?
I mean, I was definitely struck by, I mean, for me, that is so great to hear that comes through, because yes, for us, I think is really one of the main themes is really a meditation on change and how change happens, not only individually, but as a community, as you can see over the years, and how difficult that work is. And it was definitely something that struck me from the get-go, from seeing these incredible stories of these women who are really fighting to be a part of the world, to be relevant, to there was Vatican II was an invitation to really be a part of the world, and the Immaculate Hearts fully embraced that, and really were, and change is part of life. And when they started to change in so many different ways, the structure, the institutional structure of the church became, I think, very afraid, as Rosa says, has been talking a lot, I think it was out of fear, and what that would mean. And I think but we see that, over and over again, repeated in history, like there are the movements towards change, and a lot of that is a lot of the reaction against it, I think, really comes from a place of fear, and a place that sort of the status quo is gonna eviscerate, and so there is that really push against, and unfortunately for the Immaculate Heart sisters, they felt the full brunt of the hierarchy of the church, but in a way, I think it really led to a larger movement and a greater awakening, and in the creation of the Immaculate Heart community, which is not only alive but really thriving today. And we can see that they are taking part, in so many actions, for immigration. And Rosa and many members go to Nogales every year for immigration, and they're administering to prisoners. They are fighting for the environment, things that are part of the world now, and we're changing. So it is, the change continues, and they are still there 50 years ahead of us. So it was very much about that.
No, that's incredible. It felt so, I was watching like the footage from like the 60s, and it felt so modern, and so many of, like the attitudes of these sisters. It was incredible to me, because I felt like I was seeing, I could relate to now, the same attitudes were used back then. They were so progressive and forward. It's just really incredible to see. And Lenore, Rosa, and Ruth, was there ever a specific point where it really hit you, you realized the scale of what was happening, and that history was basically being changed, and it was broader than just the Immaculate Heart?
I think we were all aware that what we were doing was really in response at first, and certainly in response to what the church asked us to do. You know, they, after Vatican II, there was an edict that went out to religious communities, men and women, to update, to become more current in their dress, in their mission, to become more relevant to the world. That was a clear mandate from the church, and we thought we were doing that. We spent a whole year or more in commissions involving all the community members to look at our mission, to look at our system of government, to look at our horarium, you know, the way we spent the day, to look at our missions, how we were preparing for teaching and all of that. And so we took it really seriously. And it was kind of a blow when suddenly, you know, we began to get real resistance. And that was kind of a problem, except that we then voted for people to really put it all together. You know, we had commissions all over the place, and then we voted for about 25, voted on members of the community to go to Montecito at a place we had there, and to put it all together in a summer, and they did. And you know, we were all kind of, you know, sitting back and wondering what was going on in Montecito, and we were kind of waiting for them to come back, you know, with their report, and there was great interest and concern and anticipation in the community. It was fun. It was really fun because we had the right people in Montecito. And when they came back and reported on what they had put together, most of us really liked it. We felt it was exactly what we wanted. Not everybody in the community felt that way, but the vast majority did. There were about 50 maybe in a community of 600 that you know, didn't want to change, didn't want to change. They were very much seeing things the way I think the cardinal saw things. But we, the vast majority of members in the community, were ecstatic at how they had put this together, and how we felt it was really meeting the modern times. You know, we could be women of our times. We could be American women, you know, in the church doing our mission. And it was exciting and terribly exciting. And when you talk about, you know, maybe, you know, was this a great movement? You know, we're American women, and I think American women, you know, in the 60s, they were beginning to go into, to take positions of authority in our government. You know, and our government needed women, like I think the church needs women. But anyway, kind of a brief summary, but it certainly expresses, I think, where the community was at that time.
And then also in the documentary, at Corita Kent's 100th celebration, there's a speaker that says she combined the arts with social activism and with a message of peace and love. And I just see it in the way that Corita used her screen printing and her art to spread a message. It's almost how all of you are using film as a medium to do the same thing and share a story, which I think is pretty powerful. Does this project feel to you?
Lenore, do you have a favorite piece of Corita's?
Well, when I think about Corita, she visualized for us what was going on in our spirit. We were, you know, to broaden the context, in the 60s, we had the civil rights movement. We had the beginning of the women's movement. And so, I taught in the college. And what reflects today is the spirit and courage, enthusiasm and passion of young people, which is what is happening today. So not only were we in the context of not opposing, but wrestling with control from the church, but we were living in the broader context of society and the world. And what Corrida did for us was to visualize what we were feeling, experiencing, teaching in all of our classes. So the community that was beyond the sisters, it was the college community, the community of the city, of the country. And we were part of that growth and part of that change. And we were inspired by one another, by what was happening by Martin Luther King. Students opposed the Vietnam War. So our voice was one, and Corrida verbalized for us. If you want peace, work for justice. And through all of our classes, that was thematic. Work for justice, work for peace in the broader context of the world.
Amazing. Yeah. There's a quote in the film where you say, "Of movement is a movement, and by definition, it keeps going." And I really love that. It just really encapsulated the film, and it encapsulated in the times we're living through right now. And Rosa, and you do a lot of work in the new Immaculate Heart community, correct?
I am part of the community. February 8th will be 30 years, and I'm part of the different commissions. I'd like to point out part of the movie that perhaps some people may miss, and that's where there are some high school students, women, young women, who are speaking about their school and went to Cardinal McIntyre and went face to face with Cardinal McIntyre asking about what it was going to happen in the school. I was in that school. And at that time, our parents were assured that no school was going to be closed because there would be no teachers, because the sisters were asked basically go and leave. You can't live in the convents, you can't teach in the schools anymore. And that was not true. Our school was closed. And as you could see in the film, it was girls, young women of color. And that was a lesson for us of what happens through authoritarian figures. Our parents they were upset. Our school was closed. People who asked, well, what happened? The Archdiocese said no school was going to be closed. They said we were incorporated with another school. Well, what's left of that high school is a parking lot in Chinatown. So one of the things that I learned as a young woman was what it was to be faced with misogyny, with sexism, with patriarchy, with racism. But what I also learned from the sisters was how to face this with love, because I saw that their actions were actions of love. They said nothing hateful about the patriarchy, and everything they did with style. And I'm grateful for that.
I have so many pages of notes, but I have a quote from Corrida in here that says something about if you're gonna do it, you're gonna get criticized anyway, so do it with style.
Yes, exactly.
And I love that. That was amazing.
Exactly.
Yep. In the film, you say they helped you to think critically, expand what you knew about the world, and to question authority, which was an important thing for a young woman of color to absorb.
Yes, and it's important now too.
I hope everyone can see this documentary. I mean, I grew up going to a private Catholic school, and I hadn't heard this story before.
Oh.
And it just shocked me. So I'm just excited to see, your stories be told, and to see what comes after Sundance for you guys, because this is some amazing stuff.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
of
you so
course.
much.
Yeah. Wanted to thank for talking with me today. And Lenore and Rosa and Ruth, you guys are proof to me that change is possible. Like, I can actually see it You know, I watching this, I watched women change history, and that just meant a lot to me. It was really empowering. And maker myself, who wants to tell human stories, I'm just so inspired by your work, and I am so lucky to be able to talk to you guys. So congratulations for everything, and thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, it means a lot. Thank you guys.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you so much.